Welcome to Leave Room for the Magic, a podcast that invites you to embrace the wonder, beauty, and messiness woven into the fabric of everyday life. In this show, we'll bridge the gap between the practical and the spiritual, providing inspiration, tips, and tools from our featured guests. So without further ado, let's go make some magic. Hi, my loves. Welcome back to Leave Room for the Magic. I'm your host, Karlee, and I'm so looking forward to share this episode with you with our guest, Sabrina Virdee. I'm doing a little introduction just to set you up because, as I said, this podcast is all about embracing the wonder, the messiness of everyday life. And when we were recording this episode, Sabrina's new little puppy, Umi, kept interrupting, and he was so sweet. And this is a podcast I typically like to just film an episode, the conversation front to start, and release it unedited. But I've been having this conversation sit in post-production for a few months while we try and edit it. So I figured I would prep you about the puppy interruptions that you're about to hear, or sometimes some puppy noises in the background. Honestly, Sabrina was wonderful. She offered to redo the episode and re-record at another time without Umi. But I'm a big believer that sometimes the conversation goes as it should. And I wanted to follow the magic of where that conversation was. I didn't want to lose the essence of what we talked about because I walked away from that conversation soul-filled. I just watched the full conversation front to back after a few months. And it's a great conversation. And I didn't want to lose the essence of that. And so here we are. We're going to release the episode. Bear with us with Umi. And we're so happy to have you here. Thank you for listening. Here we go. Let's make some magic. Welcome back to Leave Room for the Magic. I'm your host, Karlee, and it is my absolute pleasure to be joined today by the delightful Sabrina Virdee. Sabrina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I'm emotional already watching you speak. It's like, I don't know why, but I'm overcome by a lot of emotion, but thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Honestly, as most people know, all emotions are welcome in my world. And so whatever emotions come up today, they are welcome here. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sabrina is the founder of All Is Well. And on your website, Sabrina, you describe your company as the modern wellness guide to living your most magical life, which I just love, and why I couldn't wait to have you on this podcast. So before we dive in, I always like to start off these conversations with an intention. So I'll let you go first with your intention for today.
Okay. It's a lot of pressure. I think today I would like to set the intention of vulnerability. So just being, you know what? I'm going to pick him up and see how long he sits with us for.
Perfect.
If that's okay. His name's Umi. I think vulnerability is where I would like to sit, to be vulnerable and to allow myself to offer what I can from the most authentic space. I find that so many times a day, a week, a month, we shy away from being vulnerable. So then we're not able to share authentically. So that's where I'm at today. What I'd like to share with you for the hour.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for bringing your vulnerability and bravery and courage in that vulnerability, because I know that could be difficult to share with the world. So thank you. Okay, wonderful. I'll share mine. So I always start my intentions with, to the spirit guides of the highest good and compassion and the eternal loving presence. Thank you for a wonderful conversation with Sabrina today. Thank you for speaking through us with love, joy, and compassion in that vulnerability. Thank you for spreading the magic through us and through everyone listening to this conversation today. That's my intention for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful.
You're really made of magic, my friend. You've given me goosebumps.
Well, thank you. I do love intentions. I find it such a nice way and a refreshing way to start conversations that oftentimes we jump into. And, to go about things with intention is a nice practice to have. Wonderful. He's so adorable.
I'm glad you find him adorable because this was not how it was supposed to go today, but here we are.
Oh,
we'll
good.
make it
Here
work.
we are. Here we are. We're dog lovers here on Laboring for the Magic. So speaking of magic, talk to me about your business and how it all got started and how you infuse the magic through your business.
So All Is Well is the extension of my love and great passion of health and wellness. And as a nutritionist and strength coach, I felt that bringing a space where women could be themselves, ask questions, support one another, learn from one another, where I could also share my knowledge would be, again, just a very seamless transition as to from where my practice was to where I want it and where it is and where it's going. And I think that's in a nutshell. And I just want to be able to meet women where they are in their wellness journey. And I want them to feel supported, feel seen, feel heard, and providing them with the reminder that they too hold magic and are made of magic and can find magic in any of their journey, at any part of their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your journey and how you have found and held on to your magic throughout your journey over the past little while. So feel free. Where do you want to start with it?
You know what? I guess we can start with where All Is Well began. That was about. I'm reminded the other day as I was just about to file my tax or start to the process of filing my incorporation taxes that it's only been 2 years, so it's not even been that long, but it feels like a really long time ago. The idea or the seed of All Is Well started in an evening, a very actually challenging time, a very, very challenging time for myself. And I think like many, COVID really started to uncover layers. And this was in the winter of the first year of COVID. So I guess COVID started in March. It would have been that following December, where I was folding laundry with my children's father, and we were just, the fire was on, and all very randomly I said, well, I guess it's not random at all, is it? I said, I am going to make Tulsi tea. And Tulsi is a part of the All Is Well business, and without getting too much into it, is something that I recommend to my clients quite regularly. And he said, okay. And that was it. By the end of the night, I had the name All Is Well. And it's such a profound piece of my life, because at that time, I struggled from anxiety and depression. And at that time, I was struggling a lot with anxiety and depression. I was going through a separation. We were going through a separation, and I was just trying to find myself. And within building All Is Well, I have started to uncover my own magic outside myself. So, I think that's where we can start some part of the story, and we can start to uncover from there. But All Is Well is also a very important piece to me, because it's allowed me to find my magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What magic have you discovered throughout this journey within yourself?
All the hard questions so early on. My gosh. I don't know. We're going easy questions here. Wow.
I like deep.
And I do too. And I think maybe that's why I came in feeling so overwhelmed by such deep emotion. And so thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's not often that I sit on camera and ugly cry. Very early on.
Really beautiful crime.
So here we are. Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Absolutely. Throughout that journey, what are some of the layers you uncovered about your own magic that you rediscovered over the last few years?
I would say that one of the big ones is that I'm capable of so much. I'm capable of much more than I believed I was, and that I'm home with myself, that I don't need others to keep me safe. I think most of my childhood and my adolescence and early adulthood, I searched for safety, and all I wanted was safety.
Yeah.
And it's been very apparent to me in the last couple of years that safety is within me. I am home with myself, and I don't need to find that anywhere else. Of course, there are things and circumstances that potentially can make situations unsafe, but I am my own home.
Yeah.
And in my home, I'm safe.
Yeah. What are some of the tools and practices? I always say on you mentioned anxiety and depression as well, and going through bouts of that. I always say everybody's got their own set of tools that work for them, and it's their own combination, and there's similar flavors amongst, mental health and recovery, but there's different, I would say, medley that works for each individual person. So along your journey, what would you say has really opened you up and helped you along that path?
What I feel has been very grounding is parenting, being a mom. It kind of is the biggest shitstorm, and also the most grounding of things, because it allows me to really come back to present, come back to now. And if I'm not able to do that myself, my kids make sure that I do. So there's that. Meditation, movement are two also very, very big ones for me. Meditation was always something that was very challenging for me, or I didn't come easy for me, because quieting my mind, quieting my anxious mind was quite challenging.
Yeah.
And the more I did it, better I got. And again, like everything, it's practice.
Yeah.
And so my practice is not perfect, but I do have a pretty solid practice that I incorporate daily. And movement. I think movement is one of our biggest free resources and pieces of medicine for us all. And whether that be that we are lifting weights, or we're walking or running or doing yoga and Pilates, or however we're moving our bodies, I feel that that's an incredible piece that we should be incorporating, and that we can incorporate to help our mental and emotional state. And then lastly, Tulsi tea. I found, and I have found for many years, actually, Tulsi tea can be very, very, very supportive for our nervous systems. And which is why I believe having any ritual that you are incorporating Tulsi tea can be so supportive. So whether that be a morning ritual of wellness, or an evening or afternoon one, incorporating Tulsi tea into that ritual can be so uplifting, can help support and calm the nervous system at any moment in time.
I love that. Yeah, because I think a lot of people talk about morning routine and how important a morning routine is, but not a lot of people talk about how important an evening routine is. And I know in your All Is Well series that you do with Alicia Madeline, who is also a guest on this podcast.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about the importance of sleep, the importance of a nighttime routine. So how is that nighttime routine really evolved for you or integrated for you?
I was actually last night in one of my coaching calls for one of my groups, we were laughing because another guest that had joined us for one of our transformation series said, after I heard you say that you're in bed at 8:30, I thought there was something I had to do to go to sleep earlier than 11. And we all laughed. And I thought, I've always been an early sleeper. I've always worshipped sleep. It's something that has been very, very important. And I guess as I was raised, my mom kept putting me to sleep quite early. And either way, whatever the case may be, it's something that I've adopted in my adult life. And I feel that our nighttime routine is what sets us up for success the next day. So, yes, we do talk a lot about the morning routine, but if you don't have good footing and you haven't set, a foundation the night before, then it doesn't really matter in my opinion, what you're going to do in the morning, because you haven't slept well. Your nervous system has not calmed down. Your body hasn't repaired and regenerated itself as it should at nighttime. And you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Right. So my routine, it's pretty simple. I journal a little bit. I drink some tea. I might read a little bit. And then I'm on to sleep.
Nice.
There's no bells and whistles on my end, but it's just, I think it's something that we have to practice as well. And we have to train our bodies.
Yeah. I feel like it has such a trickle effect to the morning as well. Once you establish that nighttime routine as well. Like for me, even setting up, I try and drink, even just hydrating and drinking. I have this 2-liter jug, that my husband makes fun of me for, that I try and drink at least one of those a day. And I always set it up the night before so that I know it's refilled in the morning on our kitchen counter for the morning, so that I'm not tired and don't fill it up and kind of skip that as a part of my morning routine. If I've done it the night before, at least I'm setting myself up for success. It's on my desk. I know it's there when I go, type of thing.
That's such a good point, because that's like everything. If we're failing to plan, then we're planning to fail.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's another way and a more refined way of saying it, but it's pretty straightforward in the sense that we all need to sort of set ourselves up for success. And I was telling my daughter the other night, I said, from now on, we're going to put your clothes, and something I've been trying with her for years now, to put her clothes out the night before. Yeah. And she's been great the last 2 mornings. Her clothes are out and she gets them on, and there's no fuss about, is she going to wear this or that, or this, she doesn't like the way this fits. And it's because she's had some time the night before. She lays them out and then it's set. That's what it is. And of course that room, it leaves a little less room for failure, for lack of a better word. And on her end, discomfort of her choosing. I don't know. Right? Like, I think it's just setting ourselves up the night before can make a world of a difference.
Yeah.
Water, clothes, whatever that is.
What do they call it? Decision fatigue, right? We make so many decisions in a day that we get decision fatigue by the end of the day. So it's like, if you just go on autopilot, think the low impact decision the night before, then you can leave room for the bigger decisions throughout the day.
100%. Yeah. And I guess at 6, what you're wearing the next day is a huge decision.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wonderful. One of the questions that also popped into my mind as you were chatting is, in the hard days, whether it's your own practice or what you advise clients to do, on the hard days where people just feel like if they are going through anxiety or a down day, and they don't want to get up and work out and they don't want to do the routine, it feels very far from what they want to do on those days, which, the mental battle that often happens, because I've suffered from anxiety in the past as well. Like, I know the mental battle that happens is, I know it's going to make me feel better. And yet getting that energy and summoning the energy for it can be so difficult on those days. So what are some of the practices? What are the things you tell yourself? What are the things that you suggest clients do on days like that? Any advice for that?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one, right? Because I think the first piece is to figure out whether or not we are getting in our own way. And is it that we need time for rest? And is it that we need to listen to our bodies and listen to, our minds and our hearts that say, hey, today is not the day. Today, just take it easy. Or is it that we are allowing this feeling of complacency almost to overtake us? And I think so there's that. It's always asking a question. What is it? Is it that I actually need the rest, or is it that I'm getting in my own way? And then once you figured out one way or the other, and most of the time it's we're getting in our own way.
Yeah.
Right. And once we figured that out, it's reminding ourselves of how we feel. And if we can't get to that fitness class that we take every day at 6:00, then maybe it's just to walk.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just some light stretching.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's switching it up and, a breath work session or a meditation app that we want to pull up. And so it's always honoring the fact that there is something that we want to do to support our wellness and our goals, as well as knowing that it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
It never has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that we forget that it's all the small things that we do every day that amount to our success.
Mm.
Right. And so, okay, we didn't go to the 6:00 class. Great. Stretch.
Yeah.
And if you can make the class, great. But I think the first decision is always, am I getting in my own way, or do I actually need to rest?
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of rest, one of the ways I've redefined rest for myself these days, because oftentimes, sometimes it feels like I need rest, and that feels like laying horizontal. But then recently somebody said to me, well, rest isn't just laying horizontal. And I was like, oh. And so I really started to, every time I say rest, I say rejuvenation. What's going to rejuvenate me?
I love that.
Yeah. And it's like, is that cooking a good meal? Is that going and cleaning up the garden and doing some weed? Like, is it weeding my garden, which doesn't sound rejuvenating, but is somehow like really cathartic for me personally.
That's incredible, that rest piece. And it makes so much sense. We don't have to be closing our eyes. Taking a moment, a breath for a moment, or, sipping on tea or enjoying something that makes us feel good. And not because it makes us feel good because it's an emotional attachment, rather than it's nourishing.
Nourishing. I love that word too.
Right? And so, that's, I love that. Rejuvenate. So good, Karlee. That's so good. That's so good.
That's one I've really been holding on to this year. I heard it in December, and somehow my mind went, shh. Because I was like, really, I used to do a lot of rest by I used to work in the television business. So I'd watch a lot of TV, and I love TV shows, and I love the creativity and that kind of stuff. But then it just sometimes becomes a numbing, right? And
that, I would say, is not rest. TV is not rest.
I know.
And while it is numbing, and while it can sort of solve, quote unquote, solve so many problems in that 45 minutes or hour of watching whatever you're watching, it is not rest. And it's certainly not rest if you're doing that right before bed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not rejuvenating, because if I change it to rejuvenating, I'm like, it never rejuvenates me. It's just like a zone out and an escape, and then whatever. But there's other things that, like I say, aren't horizontal that are very rejuvenating. So I try to redefine my own definition of rest recently.
I love that. I think I'm going to adopt that into my days. I don't know that I'll be doing any gardening.
Yeah.
Something.
Not for everybody. That's, like I said, unique tools
No.
to each person.
No, but
especially weeding. Like, who likes weeding? But
oh yeah, not me. But you're welcome anytime. There's lots of weeds on my end that need to be pulled or whatever you call the weeding process.
Totally. Awesome. Well, one of the other themes that I've chatted about in some of my other episodes as well, this concept of leave room for the magic. Actually, I'd love to start with, when you hear the term leave room for the magic in your life, what does that bring up in you for your definition of that phrase?
I think for me, or I believe right now, and I think if you asked me tomorrow, it'd maybe be a different answer. Or if you asked me last week, I would have had some other answer. I think right now for me, it's being present, being here, being able to see the magic. And I think if we are on this rat race and we're on autopilot, we don't take the time, or we forget taking the time. We don't even have the opportunity to leave room for the magic, to see it, to feel it, to be it, because we're literally just on autopilot and we're going from one place to another in our minds, or literally place to place.
Yeah.
And there is no room. There's no room to find ourselves, to find our peace, to find moments of rejuvenation, because we're just so caught up in the list that needs to be accomplished and the things that need to be done, the people that need to be seen, and people that need to be taken care of. So for me, being here, being now, being present, and that's a hard thing for me. That has been definitely a practice to remind myself it's okay. There are always going to be things to be done. There's always going to be dishes to wash. There's always going to be laundry to fold. There's always going to be emails to check. And it's okay to take some time to just be. And I think the more I'm leaning into being present and just being and not doing, because we're human beings, right? We're not human doings. We're human beings. And the more I lean into just being, which has been, again, quite challenging for me, the more magic I feel, the more magic I'm aware of, the more like wonderment even that I uncover about myself and others, and moments that I share with others.
Yeah. Now, wonderment's a beautiful word. That's not a word I hear too often. And I love that idea because it also speaks to me. I talk about synchronicities on this podcast. And so the being here in the now, the noticing, the awareness that you talk about of noticing the magic as it's unfolding in the here and now. Do you have a story that comes to mind of something, it could be big or small, that made you smile, that felt like synchronicity, where you noticed the magic? Is there anything that pops to your mind?
There is actually. And I would say it's probably a couple of years ago now, but so this again is me leaning into, or was the beginning of me leaning into being present and just being, opposed to being focused on getting to a certain place at a certain time in a certain way. And it was me, I was dropping my daughter off to daycare, but before school care. And it had been raining that morning. We get out of the car and we're walking across the parking lot, and I see worms everywhere. And the old me, the me that was too busy doing, would have just walked over the worms, walked potentially on them, and walked to the door and gotten so late to school. in this moment, I looked down and I said to her, "Look, Soleil." And she wasn't even paying attention because she was used to how I usually am, which is go, go, go. We have no time. We've got to get to where we've got to go. I said, "Look, Soleil, look at all the worms everywhere." And she looked down, and we both looked down, and it felt like a very long period of time, but I'm sure it wasn't. We just we stood there and we watched the worms, and we looked at the worms, and we hopped over the worms. And I remember feeling a sense of wonderment as a child would, right? Seeing the world a little bit differently in that moment. And I took that. I was so proud of myself that I took that time in that moment to say, hey, it's okay. We can slow down.
Yeah.
And I was able to experience life.
That's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Can I reflect like a couple things I love about that?
Yeah.
There's this conception that magic needs to be these big things, these big life achievements and moments. And I think what's so beautiful is when you talk about the present moment and being present in the magic, it's like noticing the worms, after rain, which is really fun. And you're like, they got nowhere to go. They're all here right now at the work
and
party.
They're in no rush.
No.
They're in no rush.
No. And seeing that, as you said, the wonderment, seeing it through the wonderment of eyes as if you were a kid again. And I think that's so beautiful because kids are so present in the here and now. They're not worrying about, at max, they're worrying about a week or two tests away, or maybe a month tests away.
But they're not in my house. It's what are we having for dinner? What's for breakfast? Like that's the concern in this house. Yeah.
Not too far out, right?
No.
And I think that's one of those things is when we get, I've heard the phrase of anxiety is fear of the future and depression is sadness of the past. And I know it's, like I said, that's not a complete definition of the two.
But I would agree. I would agree to some of that. And obviously there's more, but I would agree.
Yeah. And that now, that being here in the now and the presence is definitely a tool to help ease some of that, I believe. So I just love that. I love the worms. I love the everyday magic of that. What seems so, I'm going to use the term, I talk about like extraordinary magic versus ordinary everyday magic. And it's like, those are the extraordinary moments that when you stop and notice it, there's just such a wonderful feeling. And I think oftentimes we chase these big feelings and these big moments that are fleeting versus worms coming out after the rain. It's fleeting as well, but
I will say that while the moment seems so doesn't feel like much, I can feel the great pleasure that even telling you the story. And again, it's been a couple of years now, even a few years. I can feel the pride in myself in that moment to say, oh my gosh, I was able to notice worms and stop and notice worms. And the great joy that moment continues to give me. And before you asked, I actually didn't think about it. It was just that word wonderment took me straight back to that moment.
I love that.
Right? It's not as if I think about this moment all the time, but to think that such a small moment brings me so much joy still is pretty remarkable. That's magic.
Yeah. Yeah, that is magical. Yeah, because that's oftentimes what a lot of, one of the words that's going to my mind is people chase. Right? People chase those moments. People chase that feeling of joy. And we think we know what's going to give us that, but sometimes we get there and we realize it's not what's going to give us that feeling.
I'd say most times we get there and we don't get that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most times we're chasing the wrong things.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Then another question, thing that you and I have talked about is how to continue to find and feel that magic, even when external circumstances things, you talked about your separation a little bit earlier, but, through that process where, like I say, externally going through very difficult emotional times, right? Not even externally, internally too, I'm sure, throughout that process. How do you continue to cultivate the magic within yourself and in your environment through the tough times?
I want to laugh and say I went and bought a puppy, but he currently is. I don't know that he's cultivating magic for me in this very moment,
but he does other times.
Other times he does. I think, Karlee, it would be, again, just trying to just be. I would say that therapy has been really helpful. And there's so many different modalities in which one can go to therapy. But therapy has been really helpful for me because I'm one person who stays in my head a lot. And so to answer your question, it's not necessarily to go to therapy, but it's really to take whatever we're holding on our hearts and in our minds and either write it on paper or share it, unpack it, get it out. And that's not always been an easy thing for me. I find that I keep a lot to myself. I don't share a lot. I've never wanted to burden anybody with my feelings or my heaviness. And I now know that I'm not a burden and it's okay to share. And when I'm able to either get what I feel onto paper or share with someone who I trust, I see things very differently.
I'm curious, when you see, so you talked about when you share with others or when you put it on a paper, you get to see it from a different perspective. How does that kind of unfold for you?
I think I'm able to look at the situation from all different lenses. Because now I'm not just holding on to the feelings that I feel.
Yeah.
And how that situation made me feel, or how the separation is making me feel, or how sad it is, or all of those things, how my children are feeling. I'm able to take those feelings, and as soon as I'm able to pull it out from myself, there's another perspective. Because I've said it out loud now, I've wrote it out, and I'm thinking about it differently because I'm not so consumed with the feeling itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And we can get so consumed with he said, she said, this is happening. I feel so XYZ.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We all are.
Yeah, one of the things I'm just going to witness here, especially for those who are listening to audio, is, so oftentimes we actually touch our body where we feel it the most, and oftentimes that ends up being the chest. For a lot of people, hold a lot of weight in their chest, emotional weight in their chest. And so one of the things Sabrina did, as she's chatting about the getting it out of your body and onto paper or sharing with a friend, is actually moving her hand away from her body. And I think what's beautiful of that is that's what actually happens. So it gives you a little bit of distance between you and those emotions or the story that we've created in our head of what just happened. Because as another favorite saying of mine I love is, we each have our own truths, and the truth is probably somewhere in between those experiences.
Yep.
And so when we can get our experience of what just happened out of our body, it does. I mean, I talk about leave room for the magic. It leaves room for other perspectives to flow in, right? And so if that's still just in you and you're holding it all inside, it's hard to do. It's hard to shift and see something from a different angle. It's hard to do that. And so I use writing a lot as well, as a tool. In my journey, I use it a lot. And some things I found, I don't know if you found this. Sorry to interrupt you because I could see you were just about to go there.
No.
But I'm curious if you find this as, sometimes it's actually even hard to write and allow myself to write. And I'm like, nobody's going to see this. And yet to give yourself permission to speak your truths on paper even is difficult, let alone to another human.
I would say that was my biggest block when it came to start journaling. And I think that's what most of us face at the beginning. And in my practice, when I offer that my clients start journaling, they come to me to support their movement and nutrition goals. And here I am telling them to start journaling. They're looking at me like, well, that's not what I came here for. And there's this block for them. And it's because we judge ourselves so much. We're conditioned to believe these stories that are told about us and these stories that we make up about ourselves. And so I would say that was a challenge, or that was a block I had to overcome. And still to this day, it is. Sometimes I write something and I think, maybe I shouldn't say that, or maybe I shouldn't write that. But the writing and the sharing has been so profoundly moving for me in this process. And I think that, again, it's not necessarily therapy, but journaling is a form, right, of just taking whatever is on you, in you, out.
Yes. Yeah. Like it's therapeutic. This side of things.
It's so therapeutic. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so if we were talking about writing, if you were going to write, what would you call, if you were writing a story about where you are today, what would you call your current chapter of where you are today?
Awake.
Yeah. Why do you choose that word?
Because I would say that when we're on autopilot, we're sleeping. When we're on autopilot, we're not. Yeah, we're sleeping.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that.
Can I ask? Am I allowed to ask you?
Please.
Can I ask you?
Oh, the same question?
Yeah.
Oh, the same question. There is the word that keeps coming to my head and it won't leave me alone. So obviously I've got to say this: transition. And the second piece of that is, it's called, it actually was the original title of this podcast. It's called Remember Your Magic. And now I'm going to get emotional. You can hold me in my tears. Just this really strong realization over the last handful of years, how much I've tried to fit into not even what other people wanted of me, what I thought other people wanted of me. And, it's not even something that I think is on them. It's on me for internalizing who I thought I had to be to gain love and respect and that kind of thing. So I had somebody in December, a coach of mine, who looked at me and said, she goes, "You're not who you've been told you are." And that was just so beautiful to hear reflected back at me, and to have somebody see me in that was really lovely. And I think this podcast and this journey of this podcast is part of that, of me remembering my magic and helping to share it, and doing something that I love, that really, I enjoy these conversations, no matter where they go, how deep they are. I love conversations like this. So thank you for asking, Sabrina.
Thank you for sharing. And I would say that you are incredible at this. At the conversation, you are incredible. You're incredible at holding the space. I have felt so safe and held. And I started by crying. So that's a whole thing. And I get to end it by apropos. And yeah, I think you're exactly where you should be, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure having you here today, Sabrina. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and stories and tools that you share. I truly
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
your patience with Umi.
Yes.
He's still barking. He's still out there.
That's all good. Everybody got a little dose of dog medicine today, as I like to say. If you want to know what dog medicine is, just Google dog spiritual eating and see if something pops up that resonates with you. But yeah, we got a little dose of Umi today, which I love. Well, thank you so much for your time. And to all the listeners who are listening in, thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to being with you again in a few weeks. Thank you so much. Bye.